Well, good afternoon and a hugely warm welcome to what is the final lunchtime talk of this week as we explore some of the Christian claims behind what is tomorrow, where do we find our hopes, and what do we place them in. This lunchtime, the topic is that classic Cambridge question of, how's work going? And to help lead us in that discussion is going to be Pete Nicholas. If you haven't met Pete yet, Pete studied PPE at Oxford, where he became a Christian, before doing a master's. Since then, he's published a couple of books and now runs a church in London. Pete's going to speak for about 20-25 minutes, and as has been the case throughout the week, we'll have a time for Q&A after that. If you want to send in your questions during the talk, then do be aware of the number just posted up around the building. Do send your questions into there. Just one housekeeping notice. There will be some cameras just doing a bit of filming for just promotional purposes. If you have any problems or queries with that, do come and speak to me. I'll just be up at the front. Without further ado, would you join me in welcoming Pete up to speak for us?
Thank you, and it's great to be with you. I've really enjoyed being with you over the course of this week. Thanks for the engagement over the questions. I've said each day that what we're trying to do here is not in any sense trying to give the final word on any of these topics. They're far too big and significant to do that, but to continue or maybe start a conversation that we hope will be going on. And I would commend the follow-up options for you with the course Where To from here as an opportunity to continue those conversations. Also, as ever, I'll be around at the end, and so if I don't get to answer your question, or if I answer your question not very well and you want to grab me at the end, please do grab me. My time is your time. Now, we're thinking today about how's work going and this idea of success and achievement. It was just pointed out to me in a chat that I was having with someone that in coming here in this intense environment that is Cambridge University and giving up an hour of your work schedule this week, ironically, you could be diminishing your success by being here. So there's a thought for you. But my hope is that as we look at it, we're going to be finding out where we want to put our success and our hopes and our longings for success particularly. Now, this question of success wouldn't always have been a question that people would be interested in. And we can see by the kind of turnout that you are interested in it. You can track it sociologically pretty much as a straight line over the past 3 generations that this has become an increasingly important issue for people. Where do we find achievement and success? How do we get it? So the Barna Group, who do a lot of analysis on Western civilization, have done a representative sample, admittedly of the US, but I think it scans pretty well given what the sociologists say to the UK. And looking out over previous generations, 21% of your parents' generation thought success was important, 35% of your generation think that success is important, and 43% of the generation under you, 13 to 18-year-olds, think that success is important. So it's just rising all the time, and that's a very, very high percentage, 43%. For the same cohort, the importance of family and the importance of other values like personal growth is declining as the desire for success is increasing. So it's becoming an increasingly important part of culture. And younger generations are more and more likely to have goals that revolve around personal success and financial security, and fewer goals that revolve around relationships and trying to pursue personal change. Isn't that interesting? So more and more of a focus on success. Now, what I want us to do, first of all, is just to try to think about, because there are various cultural factors as to why we are so concerned with success today. 2 things I want to flag up particularly. The first one is the growth in individualism. Today, we are very much and often talked about as an individualistic culture. I'm conscious as I say that to you that you might be thinking, well, what else would we be in some sense? But if you either are from a different culture outside of the West, maybe the global South or something like that, or if you read a bit of history, you'll realize that actually there was a wide range of opinions about the place of the individual and how one places one's values in systems. So, for example, when I spend quite a lot of time in Africa working with a charity in Uganda, and when I go to Uganda, I am always asked many, many questions about my family tree and my lineage, far more than I can answer. But when you introduce yourself to someone, particularly in rural Africa, in rural Uganda, they will introduce themselves to you, giving a brief genealogy. I am Martin Nangoli, I am the son of Samweli Nangoli and the son of Enida Nangoli. My grandfather was the first Christian on this mountain, and so it kind of goes on. And The first few times it happened, I didn't really analyze it, but then I started to realize that when I was reading the Bible, I was reading lots of genealogies that always seemed to me like these boring incidental bits. And I realized that actually what's happening there is that a person's value, a person's significance in a more traditional society, in other parts in non-Western society, is not measured by their individual curriculum vitae or resume if you're American, but is measured much more by their family lineage. Now, for some of you, you know that. In other words, the genealogy of someone, their kind of corporate achievement of their family, the history of their family was the historical CV. For many parts of the world today is their CV. But for us, it's less about that and much more about you. It's all on you. What are you going to do? The growth of individualism. Secondly, the other thing that's come in is the growth of what some people call, and the philosopher Charles Taylor, who's written an enormously influential book. It's enormous because it's a very big book, and it's enormously influential as well, called A Secular Age. He argues about the growth of the immanent frame, as he calls it. What he means is when we look at the world, as people in the West particularly, and as our generation in the West, when we look at the world, what we see is the immanent. And he sets that up against the transcendent. That is, he's saying we see the world through the here and now. Not so much through the transcendent, which could be the spiritual, or it could be the past or the future. So we evaluate things and we value things that are here and now, things you can touch, things which are permanent, and partly the immanent frame has given growth to materialism. Now put those two together, the growth of individualism and the growth of the immanent frame, and what do you get? Well, you get this, that the value of any person is now based on the individual achievement in the here and now, right? Do you see how that works? Achievement and success suddenly become the measure of a person's worth because it's down to you, not down to your family or your tribe or your nation, one. And also it's down to the here and now. What are you going to do now? Not to the posterity of future generations or past generations. It's about you. And in one sense that feels lovely and liberating, and also what I want us to see is in another sense that can be hugely pressurizing and very problematic. So we're going to try and think about what are some of the problems with this pursuit of success. Because when you're in a kind of a stream and everyone's swimming in the same direction, sometimes it's difficult to kind of step out and have a good look at it. So we're going to try and do the stepping out thing and have a look at this pursuit of success and pursuit of achievement, which I'm sure for many of you is driving you. And what's really interesting as we come to this is that Jesus Christ actually has a lot to say about this issue as he helps us to reflect on our pursuit of success. Now, increasingly, this narrative that we have is that if you're successful, then you're going to be happy. Here's a lady who's a journalist called Susan Orlean. She's a journalist for The New Yorker, and she wrote this. Like everyone else, I too had set out to be remembered. I had wanted to create something permanent in my life, some proof that everything in its way mattered, that working hard mattered, that feeling things mattered, that even sadness and loss mattered, because it was all part of something that would live on. She's saying her endeavors, her work is all part of this desire to kind of leave something behind that matters, and that seems non-controversial in some sense. Well, Jesus tells a parable which, if you'd be willing, I'd love to look at it with you. It's on page 42. It's called the parable of the rich fool, but it's not just about material wealth. It's really about success, as we'll see. On page 42 in Luke chapter 12, the parable of the rich fool. Just to give context, I've been saying this each day as we've been looking at these Luke's Gospels. Luke is not himself an eyewitness. He has, as he says in Luke chapter 1, verses 1 to 4, carefully investigated the eyewitness accounts and written this account as, if you like, a collation so that we can have certainty of what Jesus Christ said, what he claimed, and who he is. And here he picks up on one of Jesus' parables, a story he tells to uncover a reality about humanity and our endeavors. And he tells this parable of the rich fool. Verse 13, what precipitates it is someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Now, inheritance is important today because it's a financial issue, but again, in a traditional culture, inheritance is much more than just the financial element. Your inheritance is, your family lineage. It's the thing that's passed on to you. It's the thing that signifies, your status in a community. Inheritance is hugely significant. And here there's a fight between two brothers. Normally the inheritance would go to the primogenitor, the firstborn son, but some would be left to the younger son. It's difficult to tell exactly, but he's probably the younger son here, and he's saying, "Tell my older brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus is seen in the culture as a rabbi, a teacher. He would be a leader of the community, so you go to him to settle disputes. So this guy's come to him. And look at what Jesus says in verse 14. Man who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you, then he said to them, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. When someone says to you something like, watch out, there's a hole in the ground, they only say that if they think that you haven't noticed it. If you're walking along and you see it and it's right there in front of you, someone says, watch out, you're like, I know, it's there. But when someone says, watch out, be on your guard, he's saying, you wouldn't see this, it's hidden. In other words, he says there's a danger with success, there's a hidden element to it, and if it's not revealed to you, then you're going to fall into a trap. Someone has said that fame and success is a bit like watching someone ride past you on a horse really fast. You look at it and you go, wow, that looks fun, I'd love to have a go. But the actual experience is frightening and a substantial pain in the rear. Watch out, he says, because what you initially think when you look at success is not what's really going on. And he talks about here, he says to this man, look, your issue is not just one of inheritance, your issue is about greed. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. What he's saying is that behind this argument is much more going on than just what seems to be on the face. Behind this argument, there's an issue of greed. Literally in the Greek, it's excessive desires. You have an excessive desire for your inheritance. You think it marks you out as significant. You think it defines you, and you need to be very careful of that approach, he says. And then he tells a very interesting parable, verse 16. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I will tear my barns down, build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. I will say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool. This very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God. In verse 16, when he uses that phrase, an abundant harvest, the literal Greek phrase is a euphoria of the ground, a euphoria of the ground. And this gets right to the heart of success. Why do we pursue success? Because we tell ourselves, if we get it, I will feel euphoria. I will feel like life is enough, like I'm enough, like I've arrived, like I've achieved. It will satisfy me. It will give me that permanence and that significance and that value which I've always longed for. And in that light, many people actually get addicted to the pursuit of success because they think if I get that, then it will satisfy me. But here's the bottom line. When people do get that, it doesn't always satisfy them. It often leaves them addicted to it. Harriet Rubin is an author and journalist, and she's done a lot of reflection on success, and she's interviewed a lot of key business people and also counselors who work with very, very high-achieving executives. She interviewed one of them who worked with a lot of high-end executives in New York, and this counselor, a lady called Mary Bell, had this reflection as she reflected on the pursuit of success. She said, achievement is the alcohol of our time. These days, the best people don't abuse alcohol, they abuse their lives. You're successful, so good things happen. You complete a project, you feel like dynamite. But that feeling doesn't last forever. You slide back to normal. You think, I've got to start a new project, which is still normal. But you love the feeling of euphoria, so you've got to have it again. The problem is you can't stay on that euphoric high. Eventually in this cycle, you drop to the pain level more and more often. The highs don't seem so high. You may win a deal that's even bigger than the one that got away, but somehow the deal doesn't take you back to euphoria now. An achievement addict is no different from any other kind of addict. I wonder if you identify with that cycle that's narrated there. Where are you looking for euphoria? Maybe you're thinking it's in my work. I'm here at Cambridge. Of course it's got to be there. If I do well enough, then I'm going to get it. And so you think to yourself, look, I was doing all right at school, but now I'm going to really make it in the big pond. And so you know what it's like. You hand the bit of work in and you wait with bated breath on what your tutor is going to say to you or as they mark the work. And the work comes back to you and you get that good grade. And it's like, yes! Of course, you want to be cool, so you don't do that. You just kind of punch under your breath like that. And you feel it for a moment, and you're a delight to be around for a couple of days. You're charming, you're witty, nothing's too much trouble, you can help anyone else with their work. And then after a bit, the feeling starts to fade. And then it comes around again, the pressure to perform again. But you get it again, but now it doesn't quite satisfy the way it did before. The sheen starts to wear off. Or maybe you hand it in and the work doesn't go so well. And you get what a person who I did PPE with and who dropped out after his first year got told when he handed in a piece of work. His tutor wrote this on his work. I remember it because it was so memorable. He said, "You are teetering over the precipice of ignorance, and I fear you will soon fall in." Yes, he really did write that. How do you feel when that happens? Do you say, it's just a bit of work, it doesn't define me? No, you don't say that. You feel the pain, the ache, the embarrassment, the shame, the defensiveness, the brittleness. Other people ask you for help with a piece of work. I can't help you, I can barely cope myself. The pressure weighs in on you. You've got to perform. You start to worry and doubt yourself. I've always been top of the class. Now I'm no longer top of the class. So what am I? Who am I? And it comes around again. Do you see that constant rise and fall? In my privilege of working with professional sports people at Christians in Sport for a number of years, I worked with top athletes, international athletes, top footballers, Premier League footballers. You know, when the crowd cheers them on Saturday when they win, they're a delight. They're lovely. They return your calls, nothing's too much trouble. But when they have a bad game and the crowd stops cheering them and they open up the newspaper and they look for the rating, which is like the rating of their value in life, and they get a 4. It's terrible, the tyranny of it. But you know what they do? They desperately need something else to give them euphoria, so they turn to other things. Gambling is enormously high amongst professional sports people. Mental ill health is off the charts in comparison to the population amongst professional sports people, because they're turning to other things. Addiction is off the charts with them because they've got to get the euphoria somewhere else because they've not got it through their sport now and they look for it elsewhere. That's the addiction. And Jesus says, watch out. Anyone who tries to pin all and their everything on their performance, on their success, on their achievement, sooner or later, that's what you're going to experience. The tyranny. Because for you, your success is not just success, it defines you. It is you. So it's great when it's going well, but you can't go well. And then some of you say, okay, well, I'm doing fine. I haven't experienced that, Pete. I feel like I'm going well. Well, here's the second problem. Do you notice what the guy does in the parable? So the guy has a great harvest. What does he do? Verse 17. I have no place to store my crops. He said, this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. What is he doing? He's ensuring his success, isn't he? He's making sure it continues, because you know once you succeed in one thing, you've got to keep succeeding. And this is the second danger, the second trap of success. Getting it once is never enough. You know that. You get it once, but you've got to maintain the high. You've got to sustain the high. And the pressure of having to do that is awful. It weighs down on you. I remember speaking to a guy who worked in the city, or he still works in the city. He's a very senior partner with a management consultancy firm. And I was talking to him and I said, what was it like the day that you made partner? And he looked at me and he paused and he said, best and worst day of my life. Best and worst day of my life. I said, unpack that for me. He said, it sounds a bit odd, he says, but I've been wanting to be a partner in the city since I was 16. In some ways, he says, all of my adult life has been about this. And when I got it, there was this euphoria. He said that I got it, finally. And then he said, as I drove home that evening, I felt like everything just fell out of my stomach. And it dawned on me. He says, now I've got to maintain this. You know, he's got a spreadsheet of his finances that show how he can sustain the lifestyle that his wife and his children expect from him. And as we explored the conversation, he turned to me and he says, you know, I feel trapped because every expectation on me is I've got to maintain this, but I'm working such long hours and I don't enjoy it anymore and I don't want to be here anymore, but I can't step out of it because I let my children down, I let my wife down, I let my family down, I let my parents down, so I'm trapped. Storehouses. The pressure to maintain it. Jesus says, watch out. And why does he say watch out? Well, he says, because life is not found there. Life is not found there. This is not life. Verse 20. This very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you've prepared for yourself? Jesus says this is not where you're going to find life. This is not what it's all about. Even those who do get a consistent measure of success, and we might be able to name some, and you're probably thinking, maybe I'll be the exception to the rule, Pete. Maybe I'm going to get it and I'll be satisfied. The other thing that Jesus says about this is that, unfortunately, the great punchline of life is death. In Hebrew thinking, death, Sheol, is like a bottomless pit, a big mouth that just swallows everything up. It sucks it in, your success, your achievement. And even for this guy who even achieves this abundant harvest and even manages to get the storehouse and sustain it, at the end, death swallows it all up. And Jesus says, you fool. It was never meant to last. He'd been seeking permanence through his achievement. But Jesus says, it was never going to last beyond the grave. I went to see, in the Egyptian Museum, I went to see some of the pharaohs. And one of the pharaohs that I was looking at, the mummified pharaoh, was there buried with his 4 chariots. He had a hunting chariot, he had a leisure chariot, he had a war chariot, and he had a processional chariot. And then I went back to my hotel room later on that evening. I was watching MTV Cribs. And someone was saying, here's my sports car, here's my day-to-day car, here's my car I drive to work. And I thought, it's the same. The Pharaoh had thought thousands of years before he could take it all with him. He couldn't. It was just a monument for us to look at. Jesus says you can't take it all with you. No wonder that God says, don't fall into that trap. So what's the alternative? Do you see the alternative that's given in verse 21? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God. Jesus is bold enough to say that what you're looking for, this euphoria, this sense of value and meaning and significance and permanence, you can find it somewhere. You won't find it in your personal achievements. You won't find it in ancient society, in your inheritance. You can find it in a relationship with God, being rich towards God. C.S. Lewis, the great thinker, wrote about how the way that what we're looking for in the imminent really points us beyond that because we never find it in the here and now. It points us to a greater reality that we find in God. He wrote this, the books or the music in which we thought the beauty was located will betray us if we trust in them, because it was not in them, it only came through them. And what came through them was longing. These things are good images of what we really desire, but if they are mistaken for the thing itself, they turn into dumb idols, breaking the hearts of their worshippers, for they are not the thing itself. They are only the scent of a flower we have not found, the echo of a tune we have not heard, news from a country we have never visited. He's saying this, the euphoria we are searching for in our success can only truly be found in a relationship with God. Now I can hear you're saying, well, of course you would say that. You're a Christian speaker, you're paid to say that. How do I know that? How can I be true? And actually a lot of the conversations that Michael, who's speaking this evening, and do come back to hear him this evening, and I have been having over the course of this week, people have been saying, it sounds good. There's something in this. It sounds almost too good to be true. Is it true? How do you know it's true? Well, here's how you know it's true. One of the great teachings of Scripture is completely counterintuitive, completely countercultural. It says this, if you want real success in life, the way you find real success in life is by, in many ways, renouncing your pursuit of success, giving it all up. It says you want honor in life. You know how you get honor in life? You become humble. You give up your pursuit of honor. You become humble. You want power in life. How do you get power? You become the servant of all. You serve people. That's how you get power. You want to experience real riches in life? You give it away. You invest in other people. And then you experience the blessing of real riches. It's completely counterintuitive, and there's no other philosophy or worldview that puts it this way. And you say, well, that sounds kind of attractive, but how do I know it's true? You know it's true because of the Lord Jesus Christ. In one of Paul's letters, 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 9, he says this, for you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that through his poverty we might become rich. What is this saying? It's saying Jesus Christ had all the spiritual riches. The Bible's claim is that he is the Son of God. He owns everything. He created everything. He's got everything. But he was born into obscurity as a displaced person in a manger. He grew up with nothing. He lived a life of poverty, of regularly not having a place to lay his head, relying on charity from people around him. And when he died, he'd lost everything, even his friends, even his garments. That's why they cast lots for his garments, his undergarments. He was naked on the cross. He had nothing. He gave it all up. Why did he give it all up? He gave all his riches up so that you, through his poverty, might become rich. He is the ultimate example of this truth. He becomes nothing so that though you've been looking to become something in the wrong places, now you might become everything to God. He gives up his honor that is due to his name, humbling himself to death, even death on a cross, so that you might be honored by God, though you don't deserve it. He looks like a cosmic failure, and yet the great irony is he becomes the most famous person, the most influential person of all history. How? By giving himself up for you so that you might become a person of great importance to God. Not a distant, remote slave or a servant, but a child of God, a deeply loved child of God. He gave it all up for you. And how do you receive that? He says you receive that by giving it all up. Christianity is the only religion, the only worldview that says you don't try and bring things to God. You don't try and store things up in your storehouses. Every other worldview, every other religion speaks like this. It says, bring your best, bring your storehouses to God. Bring all your good works, store them all up, and then you bring them to God like an offering. You say, is it enough? Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. In other words, blessed are those who come and say, Lord, I've got nothing, but you're my everything, give me it. You just receive. Every other worldview says if you store up all this knowledge about God, then you'll get enlightenment. Jesus says, come empty-handed, and I will give you everything you need. There's a hymn that goes, nothing in my hands I bring, simply to your cross I cling. Naked come to you for dress, helpless look to you for grace. Foul I to your fountain fly, wash me, Savior, lest I die. It is the great irony of ironies that real success is found by turning to the one who looks like a cosmic failure on the cross and saying, you're my all and everything. Empty hands, fill me. You've listened very graciously. We've got a time for Q&A now, so Max is going to come up and let us know how that works. Thanks for listening.
That's great. Thanks so much, Pete. Like I said, we'll be back on in just a couple of minutes for Q&A, so do be texting in any questions that you have to the number just around the building. Whilst you're doing that, just make you aware of the white feedback cards. It would be fantastic if everybody could just pick up one of those and leave any comments that you have about today. What can be done better, what you've enjoyed about the talk. That would be fantastic. Also, if you've been listening to what Pete's been saying and this is something that you'd really like to explore more, then do fill in your details and tick the Tell Me More box. This is just a way somebody can just get in contact with you, send an email about stuff that's coming up where you can pursue this stuff. But have a couple of minutes now and we'll be back on with Q&A after that. Fantastic. Do keep on sending messages in whilst we have the time, and we might be able to squeeze them in. So Pete, first question. The survey that you're talking about,
yes.
Beginning of the talk, is that just not telling us that young people value success more than older people? Possibly because they don't yet have families or relationships to value instead of the older generation has already achieved their success. For example, before coming to Cambridge, I valued success more as that represented getting to Cambridge, but now I'm here. That's no longer a priority.
Great to have a sociologist in the room. Yes, no, the survey, and I can point it to you, it's the Barna Generation Z 2017 survey. If you want to look it up, I can give you the full details afterwards. It asks that question, of course, and it cross-references previous generations and where they were at the same time. So it's not just doing where are we at today, but it actually looks over this in terms of history and says, if we go back 30 years, what did they value then, and where are they at now? So it is a genuine, objective measure, admittedly limited to the US, but there's a lot of sociologists who would claim that you can universalize that across to the West in general, and it shows that objectively there is a difference in generations, not just that it's older people. There might be a small amount of bias in that, in terms of the, yes, what you said, but it doesn't explain it all. And there's a significant shift and a focus on success today. But you can look at the survey yourself. I'll give you the full details.
Great. Relating to the passage in Luke, when using the barn as an example, what does this imply about Jesus' attitude towards having savings?
So I think it's interesting. He's using the barn as an example of someone who is placing their all and their everything. Okay, so in Scripture, a good thing becomes a bad thing when we place too much importance on it. Okay, so this is the theological doctrine of idolatry. And I've talked about this earlier on in the week, when you place your whole worth into something, when you say this is where I'm going to find euphoria, you're making that thing your idol. You worship it. You worship it. It becomes your most important thing. And so Jesus isn't down on finances. He's not down on having savings per se. But he is pointing out the spiritual danger of saying, this is the thing that will define me. This is the thing that I'm going to get real worth and significance from. In other words, you're giving it too much importance. And so if you're saying, look, savings will give me security, Jesus would say you're a fool. They won't give you security. They will give you the illusion of security. Only God can give you security. In other words, you're putting your savings in the place of God, even if you don't realize you're doing that, and even you'd say, well, I'm not sure I believe in God, you're treating savings as a functional God in your life. That's what he's warning about, not warning about just a general prudence, financially. He's not saying go and be completely reckless. He's not giving a mandate to that, okay?
Great. Buddhism says the same thing, and that's another worldview.
Yeah, I used to do a lot of reading of Buddhism. Actually, before I became a Christian, I was practicing Buddhism and exploring it. So I'm afraid it doesn't say the same thing. There are certain practices which Buddhism would talk about in terms of the importance of giving up money. Islam would also talk about that as one of the pillars of Islam. Is of course showing charity towards the poor. And so if you're saying that shows the same thing, ethically, yes, there's a similarity there. But the dynamic behind the ethics is completely different, and this is what I was laboring. The dynamic behind the ethic is not, if you do this, you will get enlightenment. That's the Buddhist dynamic. Or if you do this, Allah may be merciful. That's the Muslim dynamic. The dynamic behind Christianity is Jesus has done this all for you. And so therefore it's because of what he's done for you, not to get anything from God, not to get any enlightenment or any acceptance from God, because you are already accepted, you are already enlightened in Christ because of what he's done on the cross. So now go and do it. You see, it's completely the opposite. So yes, a superficial reading of the ethical injunctions might make you think they're similar, but you need to look at the whole system, and the system of Christianity is completely opposite to all other world religions. So yeah, please just be kind of technical and careful as you look at the wider belief system underpinning it.
Great. And time for one final question.
Yeah.
What do you do if you're not pursuing success?
Well, you'll be pursuing something. Bob Dylan, I won't try and sing his song, but he said, everyone's got to serve somebody. Everyone's got to serve somebody. Yes, indeed, everybody's got to serve somebody. Which is, in the real world, the choice is not between serving success and serving nothing, like I'm neutral, I'm not going to serve anything, I'm my own master. Well, if you're your own master, actually you're serving yourself, so yourself is your idol. You see? You always serve something. And the question is the thing you're serving a legitimate place for you to seek euphoria from? Is it giving you the legitimacy and the security that you really long for? Or are you experiencing maybe that rise and fall of your identity as you attach it to that thing, whether it's popularity, whether it's your social media profile, whether it's your performance, whether it's your sporting achievement, whether it's your looks, not a problem for me, whatever it is, when you attach your identity to something, when that thing rises and falls, your identity rises and falls. And Jesus says, don't. Attach it to me. I've died on a cross for you. I've risen to new life. I'm permanent. My achievement for you is done in space, time, and history. And if you attach it to that, it can never be taken away from you. So that's the challenge for all of us to think about. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Pete. Why don't we give Pete a final round of applause? And Pete will be sticking around for a little bit afterwards. If you've got any more questions, do come and ask him. Don't feel like you have to rush off afterwards as well. We'll be turning into a more cafe format with some tea and coffee. So feel free to carry on your discussions, conversations. In particular, there'll be an optional discussion over on this table over here. Chris Townsend, who has been a commercial solicitor in the city for about 25 years, is going to be running a discussion. Chris, do you want to just come up and say what that's going to be about?
Thank you. I just want to correct one tiny detail so you don't have a false prospectus. I started in the city, worked there for 7 years. For various reasons, including family-related ones, I left. I've worked in a national law firm for 20 years, including 18 as a partner. I should mention that. So this week, I picked up a Varsity Guide to Careers 2018-19, and here are just a few quotes that caught my eye. Make your mark. Shape your future. Want to change the world? Have you got what it takes? So in our cafe discussion, we're going to look together at the meaning of success. To begin with, without any reference to Christianity, I'm going to suggest we have a discussion about 4 dimensions of success and the pathway to success. But then we're going to take a look at how the life and teaching of Jesus, as we've begun to see, gives us a radical new perspective on success. So come and join me if you'd like to.
Wonderful, thanks, Chris. That'll be starting in about 10 minutes just down here on this table. Finally, if you have to go now, but you'd like to look into these topics a bit more, do fill in the white feedback form so someone can get in touch if you haven't done that. Also, there'll be a series of Monday evenings running throughout this term called Where To From Here. All the details are on the little flyer that should have been on your chair. These will just be pursuing some of these claims about the person of Jesus Christ a little bit further, and there will be a range of special guests coming to talk in those discussions as well. So do make the most of that. And finally, our final talk of the week will be happening this evening, and our final international dinner. So do come back for that. But until then, thanks very much for coming, and have a great afternoon.